The moment Vera Sutton walked into the Meridian Awards for Architectural Excellence, she knew exactly what kind of room she'd entered. Not because of the crystal chandeliers or the white-gloved staff circling with champagne flutes. Not because of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Houston. The city stretched out below like a map of everything she'd spent the last 8 years trying to conquer. She knew because of the silence, not the polite kind. The noticing kind, the kind that travels through a room in ripples, starting from whoever spotted her first and fanning outward until every cluster of men in slim-cut tuxedos and women in column dresses had taken a half-second inventory of her. The emerald wrap dress that took her 3 stores to find, her dark hair pinned up at the back, the reading glasses she'd tucked into her clutch, even though she'd probably need them before the night was over, and made their quiet little calculations. She was used to it. That didn't make it easier. Vera was 31 years old, 5'4", and built, as her mother used to say, like the women in old paintings, full and round and completely uninterested in disappearing. She was also the lead structural engineer on the Caldwell Center renovation, the most talked-about architectural project in Texas this year, and the reason half the people in this room were going to collect a very handsome award in about 2 hours. She reminded herself of that as she accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and moved toward the edges of the room. She did not look for him. She was not going to spend the first 15 minutes of this evening scanning the crowd for the person she most needed to avoid. She was a professional. She had spent 9 months on this project, and she was going to enjoy the recognition of it. And she was going to smile at the right people and say the right things, and leave early enough that tomorrow morning wouldn't hurt. That was the plan. Vera. She heard the voice before she saw him. She always did. That was the thing about Garrett Hale. He had a voice that expected to be obeyed, smooth and unhurried, and carrying across noise in a way that felt less like volume and more like gravity. She turned. He was standing with 2 men she didn't recognize and a woman from the firm's marketing department, and he was looking at Vera the way he'd been looking at her for the past 4 months, like she was a problem he'd solved and moved past. "Garrett," she said. He excused himself from his group and crossed to her. He was 36, broad-shouldered, the kind of handsome that photographed well and didn't require much effort. She had spent 2 years with this man. She had made him coffee and talked through load calculations with him at midnight and trusted him with things she didn't tell most people. She had also spent the last 4 months watching him take credit for her work in meeting after meeting while she sat 3 chairs away and said nothing, because she was still trying to figure out the professional calculus of it, how much to push back, how loud to be, how angry she was allowed to get. "You look nice," he said. "Thank you. I wasn't sure you'd come tonight. Why wouldn't I come? I worked on this project." Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, she'd stopped expecting that. More like mild irritation, the way someone looks when they've moved on from something, and the other person keeps bringing it back. "You did," he said. "And the team is grateful for your contributions. Your contributions." As if she'd brought snacks to a meeting. As if she hadn't spent 6 months reworking the entire load distribution system after his original design had failed the structural review. As if she hadn't been the one on the phone at 2 in the morning with the city inspector. As if the award they were about to hand out tonight didn't exist in large part because of calculations she'd run while Garrett Hale was in Cabo. "The team," she said. "That's what tonight is about. The whole team." She looked at him. She had a lot of things she could say. She'd been rehearsing them for months, in the shower, on her commute, in the 10 minutes before she fell asleep, when her brain refused to quiet down. She had arguments and receipts and a very clear timeline of events that she could walk him through in precise, documented detail. Instead, she said, "Enjoy your evening, Garrett." She turned away from him and moved toward the other side of the room. Her heels clicked against marble. She kept her spine straight. She did not let her face do anything she'd have to walk back later. What she needed was a moment of quiet and maybe a real drink, and she was scanning the room for the bar when she walked directly into someone's chest. Not a gentle brush, a full collision. The sparkling water in her glass sloshed, narrowly missing the lapel of what was, even in her rattled state, an extremely well-made jacket. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, stepping back. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking. Neither was I." The voice was low, unhurried. She looked up. The man she'd walked into was tall, noticeably so, the kind of tall that meant she was looking up at an angle that made her feel like she was outdoors. He had the kind of face that took a moment to process, dark eyes, sharp jaw, a quality of stillness about him that didn't match the noise of the room. He was holding a drink that had also sloshed, and he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately identify. Not annoyance, not the polite blankness people used in these situations, something more like curiosity. "Are you all right?" he asked. Yes, I'm sorry about your drink." "It's water," he said. "I'm not suffering." He glanced at her glass. "Yours?" "Also water." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "We're very exciting people." "Speak for yourself," he said. "I'm fascinating. I'm just pacing myself." This time she actually laughed. It surprised her. He extended a hand, Riordan Voss. She shook it. His grip was firm, brief, the kind that didn't perform. "Vera Sutton, I'm sorry again about the Sutton," he said. "You're the structural engineer on the Caldwell Center." She blinked. "I am the reworked load distribution." He said it like he was confirming something he'd already suspected. "That was yours. It was not a question." "How do you know that?" she asked. "I read the project documentation." He said it simply, like that was a normal thing that people did. "When I'm considering a building, I read everything available. The original submission and the revision. The revision was substantially different. The original design failed structural review," she said carefully. "I know." His eyes moved across her face. "The revision was better, considerably." Vera felt something shift in her chest, a small, careful loosening of something she'd been holding tight for a long time. "Thank you," she said. Most people tonight won't know that distinction. Most people tonight are here for the photographs." He tilted his head slightly. "You're not." "No," she agreed. "What are you here for?" She considered the question honestly. "To make sure the right story gets told, I think, even if only one person hears it." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Would you like to get an actual drink? I find this particular brand of water deeply unsatisfying." She should have said she needed to find the colleagues she'd promised to check in with. She should have been strategic about how she spent the next 90 minutes before the ceremony. Instead, she said, yes. His name, she learned, was Riordan Voss, and she processed that in stages over the next 20 minutes, the way you process something you should probably have known. He was the principal of Voss Development, which was responsible for 3 of the 5 largest commercial developments in Texas in the last decade. He had a reputation for being precise, demanding, and completely uninterested in projects that couldn't survive his questions. Architects in Houston told Riordan Voss stories the way people told weather stories, with a mixture of awe and a kind of bracing respect for forces beyond their control. He did not mention any of this. She assembled it from context, from the way people glanced at him when he moved through the room, from the particular quality of the space that opened up around him. What he talked about was the Caldwell Center. Specifically her part of it. He asked about the revised load path analysis, with the focused attention of someone who had actually read the documents and wanted to understand them more deeply. He asked about the timeline. He asked about the constraints she'd worked within. He listened the way very few people in Vera's professional life had ever listened, not waiting for his turn, not assembling his response while she spoke. Actually listening. She found herself talking more openly than she'd intended, about the all-night sessions, about the city inspector calls, about the moment she'd understood what the original design had gotten wrong, and felt, simultaneously, the dread of the amount of work ahead of her, and a deep, particular satisfaction at understanding the problem clearly. "You love it," he said. "I do," she said, and felt slightly embarrassed at how unguarded that came out. "Don't apologize for it," he said, reading her expression with uncomfortable accuracy. "It's not common, loving work that much. Most people tolerate their competence. You're actually interested in yours." She looked at him. "You sound like you know the difference." "I've hired enough people to know the difference," he said. "And enough people have tried to impress me that I recognize the ones who are actually just thinking. You spend a lot of time thinking. It shows, only to someone paying attention." The bar was quieter than the rest of the room, tucked into an alcove that muffled the ambient noise of 400 architects congratulating each other. Vera had forgotten about her heels. She'd forgotten about the careful things she was supposed to be saying, and the careful image she was supposed to be projecting. She was just talking. She hadn't just talked to someone at one of these events in longer than she could remember. "The Caldwell Center is going to last 70 years, Riordan said. "Maybe more. The bones of it. Your part, if nobody does anything stupid to it." The corner of his mouth moved, noted. "I mean that as a professional assessment," she said. "I know you do." He looked at his glass. "I'm building something on the Riverside corridor. Mixed use, 22 floors. I want it to last 100 years. I've been through 3 structural engineers in 14 months. Vera went very still. 3, she said. The first came in under budget and overconfident and couldn't explain their own methodology when I asked a follow-up question. The second was technically excellent and couldn't communicate a single thing they did to any non-engineer in the room. The third understood the work and could talk about it and made a calculation error in month 6 that we caught, and that was the end of that. "What kind of calculation error?" he told her. She felt her jaw tighten slightly. "That's not a small error," she said. "No," he said, "it isn't. What do you need on the Riverside project?" He looked at her with that same quality of careful, unhurried attention. Someone who understands the work and loves it, and can explain it to a room full of people who don't have engineering degrees without making them feel stupid, and doesn't make calculation errors in month 6, that too. She became aware, dimly, that the room had gotten louder, the particular social crescendo that meant the evening was nearing its official portion, the awards portion, the portion that existed. She also became aware that someone had stopped a few feet away. She turned. Garrett Hale was standing at the edge of the alcove with a fresh drink in his hand and the expression of a man recalculating something in real time. His eyes moved from Vera to Riordan and back to Vera. Riordan noticed. He didn't turn immediately. He held Vera's gaze for a beat first, a small thing, deliberate, and then looked at the man who'd stopped. Garrett's expression had arranged itself into the professional warmth he used for important people. "Riordan, I didn't know you were attending tonight." "Garrett." Riordan's tone was even, not unfriendly, completely level. "Great to see you. I've been hoping to connect. I know my assistant has been in touch about Riverside. We'd love to talk about the firm's involvement." "I'm familiar with your outreach," Riordan said. "Fantastic." Garrett's smile expanded. He glanced at Vera with the particular look she recognized, the look that meant she was peripheral, that her presence here required some kind of explanation he was working on. "You two know each other?" "We've been talking for the last half hour," Vera said pleasantly. Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. "Vera was the project engineer on Caldwell," he said to Riordan, with exactly the tone he used in meetings to acknowledge her. Accurate, but somehow minimizing, attributing without crediting. "She's part of our team." "I know what she was," Riordan said. Garrett paused. "The load distribution system on Caldwell," Riordan said, "is the reason that project passed structural review. I read the original submission and the revision. The revision was authored by Vera. Are you saying that isn't correct?" The question landed with the quietness of something very heavy being set down on a glass table. Vera watched Garrett's face move through several things in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, the specific social math of a man deciding how much truth to volunteer in front of someone whose opinion mattered enormously to him. "She did great work," Garrett said. The whole team did. I didn't ask about the team, Riordan said. I asked if the revision was authored by Vera. A beat. Yes, Garrett said. That's accurate. Thank you, Riordan turned back to Vera. Garrett stood in the periphery for a moment. She could feel it, the specific discomfort of a man who had expected to navigate a situation and instead found himself navigated, and then excused himself and moved away. Vera was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, Riordan said. I wanted the record to be accurate. For who, me? He said simply. I don't like imprecision. She looked at him. That's the reason. He held her gaze. It's one of them. She felt warmth move through her, not the sharp, defensive warmth of vindication, which was what she'd expected if this moment ever came. Something slower, something that had to do with being seen by someone who hadn't needed anything from her first. Do you want me to send you the full documentation on the Caldwell revision? She asked, the corner of his mouth curved. I've read it, the unabridged version. With the working files? You kept the working files? I keep everything, she said. I have a system. He looked at her with the particular attention she was starting to recognize as simply how he looked at things that interested him. I'd like to see it, he said. The system. You'd probably find it excessive. I'd probably find it thorough, he said. There's a difference. She laughed again. She kept doing that. The lights in the ballroom shifted, the subtle dimming that meant the program was starting, that the people at the podium were about to say things into microphones, that the evening was about to become official. We should find seats, Vera said. We should, Riordan agreed. He didn't move immediately. Will you have dinner with me on Thursday? Not tonight. Tonight is for this, but Thursday. I want to talk about Riverside properly. She considered it. Is this a business dinner? Yes, he said. Among other things, it was honest. She appreciated that more than she could have easily explained. Thursday, she said. Yes. The awards ceremony was everything these ceremonies always were. Long, warm in the air-conditioned way of places that had spent money on everything except ventilation, full of speeches that used words like legacy and vision and community in arrangements that had stopped meaning anything years ago. The Caldwell Center won 2 awards. Garrett accepted both. Vera sat in the 3rd row and watched him at the podium, watched him thank the team, watched him say her name once in a list of 6 names, said at the same speed with the same weight, Vera Sutton, among others, and felt the familiar tightening in her chest that she'd been managing for months. She breathed through it. She'd gotten good at that. What she hadn't expected was what happened after. She was waiting for her coat at the check, the room thinning out around her, when she felt someone stop beside her. Not Riordan, a woman in her 50s with steel grey hair and a very direct way of looking at people. She extended a card. Vera Sutton, she said. Yes, June Holloway. I'm on the board of the Texas Architecture Foundation. She nodded toward the thinning crowd. I read the project documentation when we selected the Caldwell Center for consideration. I wanted to make sure I introduced myself tonight. Vera looked at the card. Thank you. The revision work was extraordinary, June said. I don't say that casually. I've been in this industry for 30 years. She paused. You should be more visible. Vera said nothing. I know that's not always simple, June said, but people who do work like that and stay invisible, it's a waste. For the industry, not just for them. She tilted her head. I'm chairing the selection committee for the Foundation Fellowship next year. The nomination window opens in January. I mention this to very few people. I understand, Vera said. June smiled, brief, warm measuring. Good evening, Miss Sutton. She walked away. Vera held the card. Outside, the Houston night was thick and warm, the air sitting heavy with the particular weight of a June evening after a long day. She stood on the steps of the venue and breathed it in. The voice came from her left. You're smiling. She turned. Riordan was standing a few feet away, jacket now open, the same quality of stillness about him as before. He'd been waiting for something, his car, maybe, or just the air. A woman from the Architecture Foundation introduced herself, Vera said. June Holloway. You know her. She chaired the selection committee for this, he said, nodding at the building behind them. She's rigorous, not easy to impress. He looked at Vera. She introduced herself to you specifically. She did. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like something confirmed. Good, he said. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the departing crowd moving around them, the city glittering in the middle distance. The Caldwell load system is going to be studied, Riordan said. In 5 years, when someone teaches structural revision methodology, that's going to be one of the case studies. Vera looked at him. You can't know that. I have reasonable confidence, he said. I've been in this industry long enough to recognize when something is done with genuine intelligence versus technical competence. There's a difference. Most people get to competence. Fewer get to intelligence. You keep saying things like that. Like what? Like you've thought about this. About my work, specifically. He held her gaze. I read the documentation before I came tonight. I wanted to understand the project. I found the revision and wanted to understand that better. That required understanding who had written it. He paused. I was planning to find you, if you were here. Vera felt very still inside. Why? She asked. Because I am building something that needs to last, he said. And I know the difference between someone who can make it last and someone who will make it look like it will last. That's the only thing I care about. She looked at him for a long moment. The Houston night breathed around them. Somewhere on the street below, a car horn sounded and was answered. Thursday, Thursday, he agreed. She walked down the steps toward the parking structure. She didn't look back, but she was aware of the particular quality of the night. How the air felt different than it had 2 hours ago when she'd walked in, past all those silent assessments, carrying all that careful armor she'd spent years building. She hadn't needed it. Not tonight. That was new. Thursday came with a reservation at a restaurant Vera had passed 100 times and never gone into, the kind of place with low lighting and serious wine and menus that didn't need to perform anything. Riordan was there when she arrived, seated at a corner table that gave her a clear view of the door, a small thing, deliberate, that she noted. He stood when she approached. She had almost said something about that being unnecessary. She was glad she didn't. They talked about Riverside for the first 90 minutes. He had floor plans. She had questions. He answered them all without deflection, which was unusual, and he asked questions that required her to think, which was more unusual still. When she said she needed a minute to work through something, he let her have it. Didn't fill the silence. Didn't reroute. Just waited with the patience of someone who understood that actual thought took time. By the time they'd moved from the structural questions to the timeline questions to the completely non-professional question of how she'd ended up in structural engineering specifically. Her grandmother's house in Austin, a collapsed porch at age 8. The specific feeling of wanting to understand why a thing had failed so it couldn't fail again. They'd been there for 3 hours. You still think about that porch, he said. Every time I do a load assessment, she said. My grandmother acted like it was fine. It was not fine, actually. The whole east beam had rotted through. She just didn't want to deal with it. And you wanted to fix it. I wanted to understand it first, she said. Fixing it wasn't interesting. Understanding it was interesting. He looked at her. That's the difference. What difference? Between the engineers I've worked with who were adequate and the ones who were exceptional, he said. The exceptional ones are always more interested in understanding than fixing. The fixing is just what understanding leads to. She looked at him across the table. The restaurant had gotten quieter around them. She hadn't noticed when exactly. You see people very clearly, she said. I try to, he said. It's more efficient than operating on assumptions. Most people find it uncomfortable. Most people are operating on assumptions about themselves, he said. Being seen clearly disrupts that. Are you seeing me clearly right now? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her with that unhurried attention. The quality of it was something she was starting to feel in her chest, warm and a little unnerving. "You're the most capable person in most rooms you enter," he said, "and you've spent a long time managing how that lands. Making yourself smaller so people aren't threatened. Letting things go that you shouldn't let go. You're tired of it, but you don't know yet if there's another way." The restaurant was very quiet. "There's another way," he said. She exhaled. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. "The fellowship nomination," he said. "June Holloway doesn't hand those out. I know, you should apply. I'm thinking about it." "Don't think about it," he said. "Apply." He paused. "You're also the best structural engineer available for Riverside, and I want to offer you the contract. Formally, with documentation that clearly attributes the work." She looked at him. "You're sure?" "I've been sure since I read the revision file," he said. "Tonight confirmed it." She said nothing for a moment. She was doing the math, not the professional math. She'd already done that. She already knew she could do this project and do it well. The other math, the kind that had to do with sitting across from someone who looked at you and didn't subtract anything. "I'll send you my terms," she said. "I'll read them thoroughly," he said. "I'll want documentation," she said. "Clear attribution, in writing, from the start. That's how I run all my projects," he said. "I don't do imprecision. You said that before. It's still true." She picked up her wine glass. He picked up his. They didn't say anything for a moment. "The porch," he said. "Did you ever figure out what caused it?" "Deferred maintenance and a load problem on the east attachment," she said. "I was 8. It took me until I was in my second year of undergrad to be able to name what I'd already understood." "But you understood it at 8. "Yes, good," he said, and something in the word was warm and exact, and felt like being handed something she'd been carrying for a long time. She looked out the window at the Houston street. 8 years she'd spent in rooms that measured her wrong, too much body, and not enough something else. Always the edit someone wanted to make to a sentence that was already clear. 8 years of learning to hold herself together in rooms that wanted her smaller, or quieter, or more grateful for the space they were grudgingly extending. And tonight, a man who ran billion-dollar developments in 4 cities had read her working files before he came to an awards ceremony, had looked at her across a ballroom and wanted to know more, had said your part and your revision, and are you saying that isn't correct with the careful precision of someone who understood that words were load-bearing? She was going to apply for the fellowship. She was going to take the Riverside contract, and she was going to do extraordinary work on it, the kind of work that got into case studies, the kind that lasted 100 years in the bones of a building on the river. She was going to take up exactly as much space as she required. She already had been. She just hadn't always had someone in the room who understood what they were looking at. Now she did.